Well, Brenna, you and I have known each other for a long, long time. And, I go back to the 7-point challenge. So obviously today we want to talk about ESG and sustainability and the green movement out there, decarbonization and all the other rest of it. But a lot's happened in 20 years. So maybe from your perspective, what have you seen? And then we can talk about the present day. But I think it's always good to have some context.
Yeah, a gentle way of saying I'm old, but I'm okay with it, Henry, because we
I'm
are
that
close. But it really is, since you and I were talking and working on these topics so long ago, and BOMA has been leading on these topics for some time. It is just amazing of where we've come from then, right? Which is to say that from a public policy standpoint, it increasingly is part of our lexicon and the way we must operate in real estate. The good news is I feel really great about the resources that BOMA has put in place to support members in the industry more broadly, the collaborations with every major industry group to drive a value proposition around ESG and a business case that can really not only drive value but reduce risk.
Well, I love the fact that we've done it tangibly too. I mean, we ingrained Energy Star and Portfolio Manager in everything we do, whether it's the Toby Awards, you name it. We've ingrained that so people were benchmarking so they could look at their progress and think about the programs. And to your resource point, we've been lobbying with 179D for, 15 years or something. But now we're introducing legislation, 6921 on the House side, really looking at the Small Business Administration loan vehicles. So I think our approach to not only benchmarking and coming up with the case studies, but finding the resources so people can do the work, really important.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a real value proposition that BOMA brings that I've always appreciated throughout my career, which is, how can we bring value, resources, and financial incentives as an approach to get to a better place that we'd all like to get to. And I think we're going to see some value coming out of the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Bill. And BOMA was an active participant in helping making sure the parts and pieces were in there for real estate and for our community. But I'm also excited about, as you say, the voluntary aspects that have driven real dramatic change.
Obviously you've done so much for BOMA International, so thank you for all that and around Cal, but you're also somebody that people turn to in the industry in a big way for consulting services in terms of all these issues that are out there. We've got to look at decarbonization. In the future, we're looking at electrification of buildings. There are all these issues out there. So I'm curious, when you look to the future with the folks you've been working with, what are their concerns and what do you think we should really be thinking of?
Well, I think certainly the alignment of certain frameworks are going to be coming more in play, even here in the U.S. So SFDR, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation coming out of the European Union, will require those who get investment capital coming out of Europe to manage and mitigate risks associated with environmental characteristics and social characteristics.
Right.
So where there's going to be more focus on social, I think diversity, equity, and inclusion has been dramatically on the rise, and with good reason. And BOMA has always been diverse and promoting of diverse, not just within the staff, but throughout the organization.
And we're pushing that much harder.
And I think that's going to be increasingly important, and I think that is a value proposition to our community and the profession to see that happen. And it's, but I think that public policy and regulatory frameworks are going to put more pressure on us. But having diversity of thought and approaches, I think, is going to be wonderfully valuable.
So I have to ask, so I'll go to Chamber of Commerce meetings, and there's this resistance to ESG and GRESB and certification and all the rest, but institutional investors are driving it. It's not just Europe, it's the institutional investors. So people really need to embrace that, right? I mean, that's just 100%. A reality going forward.
That's just 100% the case. And I mean, we've had clients say, hey, maybe it's just to check the box. And then next thing they're hearing their investors saying, you're not good enough. You didn't do well enough on GRESB. You're not prepared for SFDR. You're not aligned with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD. And suddenly their hair is on fire. How are we going to do that?
Right.
And I think this is something that where BOMA has a role to play. And certainly I've built my whole career around really making ESG part of what it means to be a good quality owner and operator of real estate. And I'm part of those, our clients' efforts to improve. And that's really what it is: business case, improve, do better. And in all kinds of buckets, not just the E bucket, but in these S and G buckets as well.
So when you mentioned up front the word resilience, but you see insurance rates going up, you see people really looking at designing buildings differently, more efficient, and really being stewards of the environment going forward. What do you see happening around resilience and design and construction?
It's really dramatically changing. You know, when we had the latest hurricane that went through Florida, you saw one residential community that was built with solar power and energy
That was
storage.
really interesting, wasn't it?
The entire community
and
of
they were
surround-
outdoor restaurants were open the next day.
next day,
Yeah, right.
still in business, but homes were intact, had power, and it was a really strong message. And even in the worst of storms, we can get through. And storms is just one risk, right? We have wildfire, extreme heat, extreme cold, and we're seeing more of that in California. You know,
Right.
piles and piles of rain in a sea of drought has
Right.
created problems.
Without enough time for it to percolate, so it just goes out to sea. Right.
One of the things that we see our clients doing and we try to help them with is, you know, doing climate risk assessments, and then they often say, well, what do we do with that after?
Right.
Well, it's taking that and saying, first, validate the risk. A risk assessment is just looking at a specific address. It doesn't know anything about the property or how it's operated. That's where we can have the impact, is make sure it's being not only operated well, but are you collaborating with your neighbors? Are you working with local officials to understand what their plans and programs are going to be around resilience? And these efforts dramatically reduce risk, and then making sure you're communicating that to your insurance carriers absolutely can drive down those costs. But insurance costs, if you can get insurance in
Right.
certain locations, are going to continue to be a very real problem, and that's going to be the financial driver to make more investments that increasingly will have to be done.